Tonight, Victoria shuts its border to Greater Brisbane as the city heads again into lockdown.
This will also enable our health authorities to get on top of the contact tracing.
Also tonight, Christian Porter and Linda Reynolds demoted as the Prime Minister unveils his new look cabinet. Is working from home working for Melbourne? And two codes of footy scramble to reschedule games around the latest COVID lockdown. Good evening, Mary Gearin with ABC News. Victoria has shut its border to Brisbane and the Queensland capital is now in its second lockdown of 2021, triggered by 4 new cases of community COVID transmission. All 4 cases have the highly infectious UK strain. 2 of them went to Byron Bay in northern New South Wales while infectious. It takes the cluster to 7, sparking a 3-day lockdown and border shutdowns by most states and territories. People from the Greater Brisbane area are now not allowed to enter our state. Victorian residents can apply for a permit to fly home, but will have to quarantine for 14 days once they return.
A city plunged into lockdown once more. Authorities swift to act as Brisbane's latest COVID cluster doubled overnight.
I didn't sleep last night, so I think I am very worried.
Masks are back and schools shut, except to vulnerable students or the children of essential workers to stop any further spread.
A little bit sad because we planned a lot of things in coming days.
It's okay. It just adds a little bit of extra lockdown or a little bit of extra school holidays for us.
And despite the Premier's pleas,
please do not go and panic buy.
Within hours, queues were forming from Ashgrove.
They were lined up halfway through the shop or more, and people frustrated, people anxious.
To Maruka. Long lines also snaked outside testing clinics as people heeded the call.
We now have significant community transmission and significant numbers of venues of concern.
A mammoth contact tracing operation is underway.
This is the UK strain. It is highly infectious. We need to do this now to avoid a longer lockdown.
With the number of community transmission cases having grown to 7. 2 of today's infections are colleagues of a previous case diagnosed on Saturday. But the link to the other 2 new cases, a nurse and her sister, is not yet clear.
We will need to wait for genome sequencing results that we should get back late tonight or tomorrow morning, which will make it clear.
Regional areas are on alert after one of the new cases was in Gladstone for 3 days while unknowingly infectious.
I hope we have our Easter, but what will be will be.
We're working very closely there to identify venues that person was at.
The nurse and her sister visited Byron Bay.
I was also quite concerned about the news. We're looking forward to a good holiday and hope it doesn't get ruined.
Authorities say the nurse, who has worked in the COVID ward of the Princess Alexandra Hospital, had not yet been vaccinated due to being on leave.
This is going to be part of the Australian way of life until everyone is vaccinated.
Kate McKenna, ABC News, Brisbane.
Well, with just days until the start of the school holidays, many Victorians are nervously watching what's happening in Queensland, as well as Byron Bay, that's due to host its famous Blues Fest this weekend. For now, the focus in Byron is on testing anyone who's been in contact with the 2 cases from Brisbane. Emma Hannigan joins us now from a testing site in the popular coastal town. Emma, is it busy there?
It's very busy here. They've actually stopped allowing people on site because they say that they won't be able to get through all the people who want to be tested before they close in an hour. And it has been consistently busy here all day, as it was at the other emergency clinic that was set up, which in very Byron Bay fashion was set up at the Surf Club. But people there were making the most of the day and of the sunshine. Some people had camp chairs and were drinking beers. Now, as you mentioned, we have Blues Fest coming up this weekend, so 5 days with 9,000 to 16,000 people going through that venue every day for those 5 days. The Blues Fest organisers said today that they will not be allowing any ticket holders from Greater Brisbane to enter the site on the first day, which is on Thursday, the 1st of April. And that just echoed what was said by the Health Minister, Brad Hazzard, earlier today.
What I would just say to the people of Brisbane who might have bought tickets to come to that festival is don't come.
New South Wales is the only state that this cluster has travelled to so far, but it has said today that it will not be closing its borders.
Emma Hannigan in Byron Bay, thank you. Scott Morrison has unveiled his new look ministry with women at the centre of decision-making as he seeks to rule a line under weeks of scandals that have damaged his government. Embattled ministers Christian Porter and Linda Reynolds have been demoted, while a new task force is being created to assess the gender equity of future policies. Political editor Andrew Probyn explains.
What's better than one Prime Minister? How about two?
Minister Payne, she is effectively, amongst her female colleagues, the Prime Minister for women.
A female-focused makeover for the federal cabinet. An effective admission from Scott Morrison that his male-dominated team doesn't always see it women's way.
A fresh lens in particular to achieving the outcomes, the results that we all want for Australian women right across the country.
Karen Andrews promoted to the power portfolio of Home Affairs, Michaelia Cash to become the country's first law officer, taking Attorney General and Industrial Relations. Melissa Price returns to Cabinet, although her portfolio doesn't change, taking the number of women around the Cabinet table to 7. Anne Ruston, already there, takes a new portfolio of women's safety. Jane Hume becomes Minister for Women's Economic Security, and Amanda Stoker, the new Assistant Minister for Women.
I have not seen a cabinet put together in this way to address these key issues.
The reshuffle prompted by a shocking few weeks for government, kicked off by the mishandling of Brittany Higgins' rape allegation, then heightened by an historical rape allegation levelled against Christian Porter, which he strenuously denies. As expected, Mr Porter is demoted from Attorney General to the portfolio of Industry, Science and Technology. He stays in Cabinet. So does Linda Reynolds, who moves to Government Services and the NDIS after being stripped of the Defence Ministry, which goes to Peter Dutton. The other big winner, Stuart Robert, who takes up the Super Ministry of Employment, Workforce, Skills, Small and Family Business.
No amount of rearranging the chairs in the Cabinet room will make up for the fact that this is an 8-year-old government unravelling before our eyes.
And embarrassing allegations keep coming. Nationals MP Anne Webster filing a harassment complaint against a colleague over an incident in the chamber last week.
What was, deemed okay 50 years ago, 30 years ago, is no longer the case.
Scott Morrison is instigating a new cabinet task force to ensure every government policy is road-tested by a committee of women ministers. After fumbling his response on workplace culture in recent weeks, the PM is determined to avoid any more missteps. Assuring the women of Australia they're understood has never had so much political importance. Andrew Probyn, ABC News, Canberra.
Former Labor MP Kate Ellis says she hadn't realised the full extent of sexism in Parliament until she left politics. Ms Ellis was a minister under Kevin Rudd and Julia Gillard. She's told tonight's Australian Story that women in Parliament don't even share accounts of their treatment with each other.
Kate Ellis spent 15 years in federal Parliament serving as a cabinet minister under 2 Prime Ministers. She left in 2019 to spend more time with her young family.
Now I have a bit more perspective on what is normal. And you can see that some of these things that I used to just accept were just part of the job are really not okay.
She interviewed women from all sides of politics for her book Sex, Lies and Question Time. She found every single one of them had stories to tell, but they weren't even sharing them with each other.
You don't want to have a focus on spreading amongst your colleagues, hey, do you know who thinks I'm a stupid bimbo? Do you know who thinks I've slept with half the parliament? Do you know who was spreading rumours that I was caught naked in the prayer room?
Kate Ellis recalls one personal experience from 2009. A newspaper was preparing a story that she and her female chief of staff were in a love triangle with a man in their office.
It's ridiculous that I'm there as a federal minister, and I just remember being on the phone to this newspaper editor saying the words, "I promise I've never even kissed him. Like, how ridiculous.
The newspaper agreed not to publish, but she didn't feel victorious.
The level of knowledge about the way that my office worked, who was in my office, meant that that story could only ever have originated within my own party from my own colleagues.
Kate Ellis says women in Parliament have had enough as more stories come to light.
We are collectively a disappointment to the people in Australia, and that's appalling for the National Parliament.
A culture that continues to shock Australians on a daily basis. Olivia Rousset, ABC News.
A veteran Adelaide radio presenter has been sacked for on-air comments about alleged rape victim and former Liberal staffer Brittany Higgins. Radio 5AA apologised this morning for the comments by Jeremy Cordeaux made on his Saturday morning show.
But I just ask myself why the Prime Minister doesn't call it out for what it is. A silly little girl who got drunk.
The views expressed by Mr Cordeaux do not reflect those held by 5AA and Nova Entertainment, and we unequivocally withdraw them.
Mr Cordeaux said today he stood by his remarks. In a social media post, Ms Higgins says she's grateful 5AA is standing up for Australian women. Well, it's the first work day that Melbourne businesses have been allowed to have all their staff back in the office. But it's clear they won't get back to 100% capacity anytime soon, if at all. After the success of the work-from-home experiment, many firms are allowing workers to split their days between home and the office. In the second part of our Reviving the City series, we look at the impact flexible working is having on the CBD and visit a business that's embracing the new working week.
Welcome back to the office, everyone. It's kind of the first time for me that I'm physically starting to see people.
Melbourne's office workers have been away so long, there are classes teaching them how to come back.
It was a bit of those sort of first day back at school nerves.
The accounting firm KPMG is introducing what it calls a 3-hub model.
Client, home or office, and you can work across any of those at your choice.
I can see myself working from home for a day, working from the client office for 3 days and then maybe a day in the office every now and then.
Previously, you probably looked down at people working from home a bit and you're like, oh, are you really working?
Don't worry, employers like KPMG are checking. Turns out those at home are just as productive.
We monitor just when they're online and for how long. Not a lot of difference.
As a sign of the times, one of the 9 floors at the firm's Docklands headquarters is now up for sublease.
Because we do expect we're going to have less people in the office each day from what we've seen.
For lease signs have been going up like graffiti around the city. Docklands in particular has been hit hard. Every single floor in this building here in Bourke Street is empty. So what do we do with all this space?
Conversion to apartments is something that's been quite a popular idea and something that we've been investigating.
Could we be recycling that office space to provide a social bonus that comes out of COVID to house those who are unhoused?
What are some of the pop-ups that we might be able to create in those office spaces? You might never otherwise have thought about those for the creative sector.
The exodus of CBD workers leaves small businesses like this one, just off Flinders Lane, struggling to survive.
It's scary potentially having to lose everything that we've worked so hard for in the last 6 years.
Kerry and Jeff Chu are focusing more on a new type of customer, the so-called TWT worker, who only comes in on Tuesdays, Wednesdays and Thursdays.
People coming to the office, organising meetings and wanting food and catering. So that has been something that we would want to build upon.
Some argue the work-from-home trend is not such a bad thing to take a bit of heat out of the city.
If you think back to 2019, you know, peak hour and things like that, if you were on a tram, we were probably a bit over full capacity. So I'm not sure that's a terrible thing.
Many of our suburbs have been underserviced in terms of civic amenities, civic facilities like art galleries, museums. Think about opportunities to put more of those major civic facilities in suburban locations.
But for the Chews, having a lively city is more important than ever.
We are expecting our first baby in just less than 3 weeks' time. So Jeff and I are very excited, but also very nervous about what would happen to the shop. Hopefully it would bounce back up.
And tomorrow night in our Reviving the City series, how to get international students back to Melbourne. And tomorrow afternoon on ABC Radio Melbourne, joining the conversation on Drive with Raf Epstein. And major events will form a key plank in Melbourne's renewal. A new winter festival will see artists take over the city. Over 12 nights across May and June, the Rising Festival will feature more than 130 events and projects involving about 750 local artists. The Grand Ballroom above Flinders Street Station will house art exhibits, lanterns will light up the banks of the Yarra, and tunnels will illuminate Sydney Myer Music Bowl.
There's such a broad mix of experiences, you know, from a naked disco for one person to an outdoor installation for many thousands. You know, there's really quite a lot in this program for many different types of people.
And now we've got this beautiful festival to celebrate all our creativity together and share it with the people around us.
The festival effectively replaces the White Night Festival that won't be held in Melbourne this year. Still to come this hour, how much do you need to retire on? Alan Kohler presents a special series.
What superannuation is about is personal empowerment.
Do you think that superannuation fees are too high?
Yes. You shouldn't be forced to eat your own home.
Plus, why some experts are criticising Brisbane's 3-day lockdown. That's coming up.
About 3,000 people from Myanmar's southeastern Karen state have fled to Thailand following airstrikes by the army. The military attacked 5 areas near the Thai border in territory controlled by the armed ethnic group the Karen National Union. The air assault killed at least 3 people and forced villagers to seek refuge, some hiding in the jungle. The KNU says it's been sheltering hundreds of people who fled central Myanmar because of mounting violence in recent weeks. New vision has emerged from Saturday when more than 100 protesters were killed by security forces in the deadliest day since last month's coup. Witnesses say the military also opened fire at a funeral on Sunday near Yangon, but there were no immediate reports of casualties. A COVID-19 vaccination program is about to begin in Papua New Guinea as cases continue to surge. New infections have almost doubled in the past week. That's putting increased pressure on the fragile health system, with one doctor saying it's now in a perpetual state of disaster. PNG correspondent Natalie Whiting reports from Port Moresby.
A sports centre with no athletes. As COVID-19 cases surge in PNG, it's been converted into a field hospital. But it needs more staff.
We have one doctor per 14,000 people. That's our doctor-to-patient ratio. We're in a perpetual state of disaster.
This centre is only set up to treat mild and moderate cases, but there's a shortage of critical beds at the city's main hospital.
Last night there were 3 resuscitations happening at the same time. Unfortunately, all the resuscitations were unsuccessful.
A second field hospital has just opened and medical teams will soon arrive from overseas.
Frontline health workers are stretched to the limit. They are in the burnout.
Another Australian Air Force plane full of vaccination supplies has arrived, with the rollout due to begin tomorrow. But there are concerns many people don't want the jab.
What we want is we want all our staff to be vaccinated.
Full vaccination on Monday. Discussions have been held with staff at the Port Moresby General Hospital about the benefits of being vaccinated. So far, about 40% have agreed to it. This stadium has been set up to deliver the 8,000 vaccines that Australia has donated for frontline medical workers. But there are concerns about future supplies. A shipment expected from India may be delayed because it needs the vaccines for domestic use. Australia has indicated it may supply more doses. It's now facing pressure to commit to that. Natalie Whiting, ABC News, Port Moresby.
Back home, a 26-year-old man has been charged with murder over a fatal shooting in the Geelong suburb of Corio on Saturday morning. 43-year-old Daniel Eagle was a passenger in this car when it crashed into a truck on the Princess Highway around 6 a.m. Police say a second car pulled over at the scene. 2 people got out and fired shots into the damaged car, killing Mr Eagle. 26-year-old Joshua Rosanowski was charged with his murder and today faced the Geelong Magistrates Court. Court documents show Mr Rosanowski and Mr Eagle were known to each other. The lockdown in Brisbane will be the first in the country implemented without the safety net of JobKeeper. The massive job subsidy scheme supported almost 1 in 3 workers at the height of the pandemic and nearly 1 million workers when it wrapped up yesterday.
In Melbourne's Little India, things are buzzing in Steve Khan's barbershop. Wage subsidy JobKeeper saved his businesses when the pandemic hit.
It was such a scary time at that time because we didn't know, really, because there was no income, no people on the streets, no nothing.
But now, he's already cut staff from 13 to 5 and closed a grocery store.
We would be struggling, really, we would be struggling to sort of pay the wages, pay the rent, pay the other bills and all, the rates, the council. So there's a lot of expenses. So I don't know.
JobKeeper ended yesterday with just under 1 million workers still on it.
This has always been a temporary program. This was always an emergency payment. And at $90 billion, it's the single largest economic support program that any Australian government has ever undertaken.
Treasury estimates 150,000 of those people could become unemployed. Insolvency expert Kirsten Farmer is getting ready.
Those that have been relying solely on JobKeeper, those are the ones that will collapse immediately, but the others, there'll be a gentle, slow workout of what their position is.
Insolvency laws were essentially suspended last year, so despite the recession, the number of companies going under actually fell by half.
I don't think there's going to be the same level of shock and awe happening within the wider community. These businesses haven't traded since last year.
As today's Brisbane lockdown shows us, we're not through COVID yet. JobKeeper is done, but not all industries have shared in the economic recovery. We'll find out next month when new unemployment data comes in just how bad things are. Daniel Ziffer, ABC News.
There are fears inside Nine Entertainment that the media giant may soon struggle to print its newspaper and magazine titles as a crippling cyber attack on the company worsens. Since Sunday, television broadcasts from Channel 9's Sydney studios have been severely disrupted by a sophisticated virus that's locked up computer systems. Australia's cyber watchdog is continuing to help the media company
to ensure that they can put in place the protections that they need to have their systems restored and to have them restored safely. We regrettably live in a world where this happens.
The Australian Cybersecurity Centre is also working with Federal Parliament following a hacking attempt that's hampered the building's IT system. The giant container ship stuck in the Suez Canal has been partially refloated and is close to being fully freed. After 5 days of struggling, engineers and salvage experts celebrated as they managed to wrest the bow of the Ever Given from the shore. Tugboats shifted the 400-metre-long container ship when the full moon brought spring tide. The vessel has blocked one of the world's busiest trade routes for nearly a week. More than 360 ships carrying everything from crude oil to cattle have been stuck in the massive traffic jam. World-first technology is being trialled at the Port of Melbourne to detect a destructive mite that attacks bees. The smart hives use artificial intelligence to catch the parasite before it can spread across the country.
Taking advantage of honeybees' love for the colour purple.
If a bee lands on here with varroa, we've got it within seconds.
This smart hive has been placed at the Port of Melbourne to attract bees hitching a ride on cargo ships from countries infested with the varroa destructor mite.
It's just devastating, and they're a sucking parasite. So they suck the goodness out of the bee, and that's the first, but then they introduce all these viruses.
It's a big step up, replacing hive checks every 6 weeks with instant alerts.
It's using a combination of computer vision and artificial intelligence. It is monitoring each and every bee as it enters and exits the hive. The earlier we pick it up, the better chance we have of eradicating it straight away. So early detection is key.
Australia is the only inhabited continent that's still free of the mite. If the pest took hold here, it could wipe out most of the country's beekeeping and agriculture.
While honey is a fabulous and delicious byproduct of honeybees, their most important role
here in Australia is as pollinators.
We've seen a little bit of panic about panic buying with COVID. Panic buying without bees would be a whole new level.
It's hoped the trial will be expanded to other ports around Australia. Justine Longmore, ABC News, Melbourne.
Better believe it. To finance now, and as JobKeeper comes to an end, the government has landed a $50 billion budget windfall from the strong iron ore price. Here's Alan Kohler.
The mid-year economic and fiscal outlook statement in December estimated that the budget deficit for this financial year would be a bit less than $200 billion. It now looks like being $150 billion, although that $50 billion improvement didn't stop the government ending JobKeeper yesterday. And here's the main reason it happened. Instead of falling to $60 a tonne, as MyEFO predicted, the iron ore price has stayed at more than $150. It's as simple as that. And state government budgets are getting manna from heaven as well, thanks to the booming property market. 18 days ago, we learnt that Sydney prices hit a new record high, and today it was Melbourne's turn, 3 days before we get the monthly numbers from CoreLogic for March. And let's remind ourselves about why this is happening. The volume of household debt might be at a record high, but repayments are back to the 1990s as a proportion of incomes because of what the pandemic has done to interest rates. The oil price fell today because that ship that went sideways in the Suez canal has now been pointed in the right direction, unblocking the passage. The iron ore price went up again, which pushed up the share prices of iron ore stocks today, but that didn't prevent the All Ordinaries Index falling 0.4% because of falls by retailers, banks and AMP. The New York market had a big session on Friday, while Asian markets were mixed today, and the Australian dollar eased a bit against the US dollar to 76.2 US cents. And that's finance.
The AFL and NRL have acted quickly to make sure their matches can continue this weekend, in line with the latest Brisbane lockdown. Thursday night's match between Collingwood and the Lions will now be played in Melbourne instead of Brisbane. The Lions have been in Victoria since last week, and it's not known when they'll be able to go home.
Unfortunately, the reality right now is you don't control all the chips. And so it's not an ideal set of circumstances for Brisbane, it's not an ideal set of circumstances for Collingwood, but it's the best decision we can make right now.
The Brisbane Broncos have flown to Sydney, where they'll be based for the next few weeks. They'll face Storm in Melbourne on Friday, but might not play at home until the second week of April. World champion Lewis Hamilton has won the season-opening Formula One Grand Prix in Bahrain. The seven-time world champion held off Max Verstappen, who'd taken the lead with 4 laps remaining. Hamilton's Mercedes teammate Valtteri Bottas finished third. Australian's Daniel Ricciardo was 7th in his first race for the McLaren team. Now it's time for the weather. Here's James Hancock.
Mary, Monday in Melbourne started off overcast, but the clouds cleared to a sunny afternoon, leaving skies mostly clear tonight. Last night, temperatures were on the cool side for this time of year. It dropped as low as 1 degree up in the Alps, and at Horsham, it dropped to 6. Some light showers fell over the south of the state this morning, but it was mostly sunny in the north. The temperature dropped to 14 in town overnight before rising to 18 early this afternoon, and currently in Melbourne, sitting on 16 degrees. A mix of sun and cloud today for now lockdown Brisbane, and similar conditions in Sydney. Warmer and settled conditions are on the way for Victoria. A high will move over the state's southwest tonight, reaching the New South Wales coast by Wednesday night. And the high will bring dry conditions tomorrow. A possible shower for Brisbane tomorrow. Sunny through central parts of the country, mostly sunny and a top of 30, 29 for Perth. To our state's west, patchy morning fog for some inland areas and isolated light showers along the southwest coast during the morning, mostly sunny at Ballarat. A chance of fog in the east too, partly cloudy in Gippsland and mostly sunny along the border, a top of 23 degrees at Albury-Wodonga. On the bays, winds will be variable around 10 knots, tending southerly during the late afternoon. We could have a foggy start to the day in Melbourne. The Bureau's forecasting a partly cloudy morning ahead of mostly sunny conditions in the afternoon, dropping to 4 overnight at Yarra Glen. Most suburbs are expected to click over 20 degrees and 10 overnight in the city. And looking ahead, early fog on Wednesday before a mostly sunny day, rising to 22. Thursday, the first day of April, mostly sunny and 28. Good Friday, sunny and 29 degrees. Saturday, sunny, hitting 30. At this stage, cooler on Easter Sunday. Mary.
Thanks, James. And that's it for this evening's bulletin. Paul Kennedy is up next with 7:30.